Hello and welcome to Cloudy with a Chance of Insights, the bi-weekly podcast focusing on all elements of the Microsoft Cloud, from Office 365 through to Azure and Dynamics, etc., etc. This week, we have got a wide range of topics from both David and Cyrus, and possibly one from me, depending on time as we go through. Cyrus is going to cover off some Entra, Intune, and Purview news, so including transfer user source of authority, SOA, to the cloud, configuring Microsoft Intune for increased security, and Purview insider risk. David has got an additional 3 topics as well this week, including TypeChat and DeepSpeed, which is a new one for me. I've not heard that one before, and Markdown. And if I get time, I'm going to cover off some news around some storage, but that is going to be dependent on that. Now, before we kick off, I want to say to warn people, in effect, I'm going to go off on a little bit of a tangent before we even get started today. But for those that want to dive straight into those topics, we will have chapters. So if you're watching on YouTube, and I think on the Spotify video version, you should be able to select the chapter and then just go to the topic of choice, and you can avoid my ramble. Otherwise, you can probably skip forward by, I don't know, probably about 5 minutes, and then you'll miss most of it and then get straight into David and Cyrus's much more important topics. So I wanted to actually say 3 things probably before we kicked off in this. And I know that David and Cyrus have been aware of this. A family member of mine has actually been diagnosed with cancer and was in for an operation a couple of weeks ago. Thankfully, everything's all clear. And I know that no one's going to be watching this from that particular hospital, but I did want to give a shout out to the Frimley Park NHS Trust, who were actually really, really supportive and really helpful. I know the NHS gets a lot of stick, and mainly that stick, I think, is probably generated at sort of middle management and above and government strategy, not so much the people that are actually on the front lines. But I did just want to sort of say it. Again, I know no one's going to be watching it from there, but hey, at least it's out there and publicly, so they were amazing. And touch wood, everything is okay with that particular family member. The other thing I wanted to talk about a little bit was a post that I did on LinkedIn and a response that came back from that post. So this is actually going back a couple of weeks. I don't know whether David or Cyrus actually saw this one, but it was actually from IBM alumni. And they were doing sort of like a fluff piece, for want of a better word, saying about why Richard rejoined IBM after spending some time away. I reposted it on LinkedIn and we got some odd comments. Well, not an odd comment, that's unfair. So a little shout out to Chris Gates, who was the manager that was in place when I joined IBM. I was going to say he hired me, but he didn't. The hiring decision had already been made and then Chris got the role. So he didn't actually have any say in hiring me. And this is tying into a question that somebody asked me the other day, which was, why are you doing the podcast? We didn't see it. And I could see David laughing in the corner. And the reason for them asking was that they didn't see me doing something like this. Does that make sense? They'll say, oh, yes, Rich, we know you. You don't seem the sort of person who's going to go and do a podcast. And this relates to the comment that Chris made on the LinkedIn post, which was something along the lines of, with your unique personality traits. And that's been sort of bubbling around in the back of my head for a couple of weeks now. And that's actually one of the reasons why I'm doing that. So that short code from Chris is basically the fact that typically I'm a bit grumpy, pessimistic, and autistic. So those not necessarily the 3 character traits that go towards going, hey, I'm going to do a podcast with David and Cyrus's assistance, of course. But that is actually one of the reasons why I wanted to do this, is because it's hopefully going to try and get me out of that sort of, oh, I want to sit in a room and write code type personality all day without necessarily doing anything. So anyway, that came up for a question, so I'm hoping I've answered that one. So shout out to Chris, who's also released a podcast himself. I'm not sure, due to my unique personality traits, that I would necessarily join that particular podcast. I think it's called Midlife Murmurings. I'll put a link to anybody who's interested in the notes for this, or obviously go and look at the LinkedIn feed. I'm sure you'll see it there if you're connected with me. And finally, I wanted to also just give a shout out to Paul Grimley, an ex-colleague of myself and David, who is a listener apparently of the podcast. He announced on LinkedIn. Again, LinkedIn is probably one of the best places to sort of communicate with me anyway. He's left Microsoft. I just wanted to wish him best of luck with whatever he's doing in the future. He wasn't clear on the notes whether he was going into a new role or not just yet, but best of luck to him. And there is life outside of Microsoft. I think both himself and David are evidence of that. So without further ado, I will pass it across to, I think Cyrus went first last time. So I'll pass it across to David to kick us off with TypeChat.
Well, let's not, because I want to go on your tangent, actually. So,
perfect.
But yeah, one of the things that I've historically struggled with, I'm very much an introvert. So, being able to stand up in front of lots of people and do that big talky thing is actually quite difficult. I think I've got. I mean, I guess we all do, right? We have our own coping strategies as to how you manage that. But I definitely have a social battery, and I will sort of push myself, and then there's like this hard limit. And as soon as I get there, I'm like, I'm done, I'm gone. And this, indirectly, I think this helps with that, because it's helping me develop those mechanisms for being able to talk without being uber prepped, if that makes sense. Does that make sense? I don't know, because
it does make sense, yeah. And certainly between the three of us it makes perfect sense, because although we've mentioned this before, we don't, or at least I don't, edit this podcast. So you get everything. When we release it, you get all of the sort of ums, ahs, murmurings, digressions, dogs whining in the background, which I'll probably have to try and edit out. But anyway, so yeah, that does make sense, because again, we don't, this is going to sound terrible, but we don't prep for this as such. We don't meet as a group and plan what we're going to be talking about and how we're going to do this. In fact, I don't think David or Cyrus, I've actually spoken to you at all this week, and we're recording this at 20 to 10 on a Friday morning. So yeah, that statement does make perfect sense, because it is almost sort of like a flow of consciousness piece here, where we're saying, okay, we're going to talk about this subject and we're going to go for it with not necessarily a lot of prep or a lot of structure behind it. Sorry, I'm conscious that I sort of interrupted you mid-flow there.
And I agree completely. And I think that, I will send myself little WhatsApp messages of interesting snippets. And then generally, quarter of an hour before this, I'm like, oh, what are we meant to be talking about? So it's a bit, I try and make sure that, what I share is interesting and all that good stuff. But it's the after effect, because it sticks then, right? Yeah. So whilst you have to have that little bit of upfront research, as it were, it's kind of stuck there for future conversations. And I've found many of the conversations that we've had, 2 or 3 weeks later with customers, and this stuff just sort of falls out because we've been talking about it. So there's an adjunct real benefit from doing this that I've found. So yeah, it's worth calling out, right? Because it's effort in terms of organising people, and you do a superb job, Richard. But I think it's well worth the effort, I think. And,
I agree with that. Again, when this person was asking me, why are you doing this, the answer wasn't, oh, we're doing it for likes or followers or any sort of social. I don't know what the word would be. However, having said that, depending on the platform that you are watching us or listening to us on, please do like, subscribe, follow, ring the notification bell, etc., etc. Not necessarily because we want to hit, I don't know, whatever sort of metric of followers. Because when we were planning this, we didn't say, oh, we want to hit this number of subscribers or this number of followers. But it does, what I found, help people discover what we're doing here. So if you do find it useful or interesting, please do that, because it does apparently provide more audience capabilities or reach capabilities around that. But I agree. I mean, I'm naturally an introvert as well. So this is why this person was very surprised that I was doing this, putting myself out there. And I certainly found during, as an after effect of COVID, for example, that during the lockdown, in a way that was really sort of helpful for me, because it meant I didn't have to go and do all this sort of extrovert type things that people were expecting of me. And I could sit in the office, go on a video call, or even not on a video call, and do whatever I need to do. So I got into a really bad habit during that period of time of doing that. So this is one of those things of trying to sort of put everything back out there, for want of a better word.
All right, sorry, digression, but
yes. So that might have been longer than 5 minutes. So whoever did follow my advice and skip forward for 5 minutes, you probably still got the tail end of that. So, but if you use the chapters, you should come right to this point now, where I will hand over to David to talk about TypeChat.
Yes. So, and I would say TypeChat is, I guess, something small. It's quite elegant, and I suppose you could say very Microsoft. Yeah, you could say it's very Microsoft. And if you think about, well, maybe we haven't, right? But if you ask an AI to give you structured data, and then it happily hands you back, some JSON, has it always worked? Probably not. I've had loads of instances where it's missing a comma, or it's missing that, missing the other. It's got wrong field names. It's it's a bit of hallucination wrapped in there, all mixed in, right? And I think that's the gap, as I understand it, that Microsoft's TypeChat tries to close. So TypeChat is a developer library that helps you build natural language interfaces that then output typed validated data. Super interesting. So instead of, to your point, Richard, sort of almost begging the thing with prompts, right? Please just give me the data that I want. You can hand it a TypeScript or a JSON schema, which is essentially a definition of the shape of the data, the shape your data should have. Sorry, and then TypeScript, I understand, sort of does three things. It then builds a prompt based on that schema. It validates the AI's response against that type. And if it doesn't match, it'll automatically try and repair it or retry until it does, right? So under the hood, it's model agnostic, right? So it'll work with OpenAI and whatever else that talks text, right? Which is most of the models. And the reason it matters is that it helps with that whole hallucination thing. And the more I use it, the more you can spot it happening. So anything that can intervene, and you could argue it's maybe more prompting, I don't know. But anyway, but ultimately, it helps you make sure that you keep the language models honest and you force them to speak the language of your app, right? Literally, in that sense. And I think it's being used inside like Copilot integrations, where obviously reliability does matter in that case. But it's also open source, so you can go to the link down there. It's on GitHub, the TypeChat repo, and go have a look. I guess the thing to watch out for is, because you're inserting this as a potential loop to keep sort of fixing things, it could slow down. No, not slow down. Add latency. That's the word. But then, equally, the benefit you get from that could potentially outweigh it. So well worth a bit of a peruse. The other thing I was going to talk about was DeepSpeed. And I guess DeepSpeed, again, is buried in the Microsoft Copilot ecosystem. You just don't see it because all you see is the UI for AI, right, which is Copilot. And DeepSpeed is, again, my understanding, the optimization engine that keeps the large language models from essentially collapsing from under their own weight, right? So being able to train a model with 1 trillion parameters is a big thing, right? It's expensive. You want to make sure that that's going to work, and DeepSpeed, I gather, is one of the things that sits under the waterline that helps them do that. And again, capabilities I've never come across, right? And there's this thing called it's the acronym ZERO, which is the Zero Redundancy Optimizer, and it essentially slices model data and computation across lots and lots of GPUs. Super interesting. So that no single card has to hold the whole thing. And you're never going to do that with a trillion parameter model, right? But being able to do that, that's how Microsoft are training models. Things like the Phi-3 model, right? How they're doing that efficiently. And then bringing into that is a thing, 3D parallelism, as I understand. So you basically split the workload, the training, into different layers. So you've got like by data, by model layers, and by pipeline. And I guess it's what's the thing I was going to use to describe? It's a bit like a relay team. So where, every runner's busy the entire race, but it doesn't wear out a particular runner up because you're handing off. So again, super worth having a look, and yeah, have a dig, because we were talking about this the other day. I think we were anyway. People it's getting to the point where people don't quite understand what underpins a lot of these technologies. And being able to dive into some of this stuff. Now, I'm not going to understand it all right by any stretch, but at least having an appreciation that under that pretty Copilot prompt, UI that you've got, there's a whole bunch of stuff that gets you there. And, other than very, very clever people who do this training day in, day out, most of us are unaware. So it's well worth a bit of an investment to go and have a poke around and get yourself.
Absolutely. And
that's the word.
One of the things we were talking about before we started recording, again, and this is because we as I said, don't really talk during the week. It's just very much on a Friday. Is that I've been messing about with Researcher this week in Copilot, and one of the things that I appreciate, I was going to say like, but it's not that I like it, but it does sort of break down and it shows you what it's doing.
Yeah.
So you give it a prompt or a query, whatever it might well be, and it says, okay, researching this, validating, consolidating, So it's actually, in a way, sort of more, it gives you a little bit more trust and faith in the results. Now, you still have to validate. You still have to apply some critical thinking to what's coming out of it. But I felt it really quite nice that it was actually sort of breaking down those steps and telling you what it was doing. Which I think is a lot better than just a spinning circle and then blur.
Ta-da! Guess how much I've hallucinated. Yeah. Yeah, completely agree. And then the last one, which was Markdown, and I've sort of been on a bit of a journey in terms of docs as code, right? And trying to, use, being able to have Markdown obviously is fabulous when you're working in GitHub and things, because it makes it easy to read. You can do it via your code editor, all that good stuff, right? When you have projects that generate a large amount of documents, trying to bring that into the same environment, the same ecosystem becomes difficult, right? If you've got PDFs, if you've got Word documents, right, you've got sort of collateral smattered all over the place. And I need to try it, but Markdown is one of these things that anyone could use, right? So whether we're doing this podcast, for example, or whether you've got research documents, to your point earlier, Richard, right? It's a Python tool that can convert almost any file, which I'm like, ooh, interesting, into usable Markdown. Right. So I'm like, ooh, and I'm pretty sure they say, right, I said PDFs and Words. I think things like PowerPoints, perhaps even spreadsheets, cool. And then HTML, I can understand that bit better because that's already structured, right? Or images with embedded text. I was like, really? Can you do this? So I'm absolutely going to play with it because I've not had the opportunity yet. But, if it gives you sort of structured Markdown that you can drop straight into GitHub or Notion or whatever your flavor tool of choice, or even straight into an LLM pipeline, right? It will normalize all those messy inputs for you. So again, you're not relying on the LLM to interpret what a Word document is. You're relying on it to look at something structured that's in a Markdown, right? And that, again, there's going to be benefits in that, because there's obviously a translation step that it does when it does RAG against a document. So super interesting. It uses a plugin architecture, I think I read, that sort of chains together different format parsers, OCR, stuff like that. So it's not just scraping text, it's, preserving headings and all that stuff that you want with Markdown, right? So it makes sense when you actually read the thing. So yeah, go have a look. It seems super interesting and could be quite fun to play with. Danny?
No, I will do, because that does sound interesting to have the ability to actually sort of have a consistent, I was going to say structure, I suppose, for some of these sort of documents or information that will be across different formats and in one place, which I was going to do my usual thing and let you and Cyrus go first, and I'll do the tail. But I thought, no, I'm going to jump in now, because you said something there that sort of relates to what I was going to talk about, assuming we had time. So now we are going to have time because I'm jumping in front of Cyrus. So one of the things that sort of stuck out to me this week, and actually probably a little towards the end of last week, is, and again, we were talking about this before we started recording, is that from a Microsoft sort of product announcement perspective, it's a little quiet. And I think that's because everybody's leading up to Ignite. So a lot of the stuff is going to be kept dry until they can announce it at Ignite in about 4 weeks' time now, I think, roughly a month. I'm not going this year, thank goodness. So I don't know issues with American Airlines messing up my my schedule this time. But anyway, one of the things that you sort of mentioned was you hinted at the sort of abundance of documentation, especially within organizations now. So there is documentation everywhere, different types, different locations, some in Azure, some in Office 365, etc. So about a week or so ago, October the 16th, so actually that's this week, isn't it? Earlier on this week, Microsoft announced Azure Storage Discovery, which is basically an ability to work with Copilot, or at least integrates into Copilot, so you can do natural language queries across your storage estate. So you can write queries like, show me how many blobs I've got in my storage and where they are and how long they've been sat there. When was the last time there was accessed? Or give me the oldest document that hasn't been accessed for a while, all in natural language and across multiple subscriptions and regions as well. So you do, in theory, and again, I use this, I haven't played with it yet, is that you've got that ability in theory to do that sort of natural language query across your estate, which I think was missing beforehand. Certainly the natural language bit was missing.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
From certainly from my experience a little while ago, it was very difficult to get a good handle on what was going across multiple different blob stores or other storage pieces. So there's some built-in dashboards. So inside categories is at capacity. So again, give me sizes, give me count, growth, trends, activities. So which one is a popular store, for example, which one perhaps isn't being used. Security, so misconfigurations, which is a big issue for blob storage across multiple clouds. We always get a sort of like an AWS S3 bucket story, don't we? That someone hasn't secured that, etc. Config, so lifecycle policies, redundancies, operational errors, sort of read write messages, that sort of stuff. So that looks like it might be an interesting piece. Again, it's one of those weird things that I looked at. We're doing a lot of this sort of natural language integration into Copilot in Azure. I do wonder how that bubbles up into an IT ops piece, but I suppose that's more of a wider topic about how you get a sort of single pane of glass over a lot of these sort of more individualistic input query devices, whatever you might want to call them. But anyway, I thought that tied in a little bit with what you said, David, about the sort of proliferation of content. So I will now pass it across to Cyrus, who is going to tell us about either Entra, Intune, or Purview. Not necessarily in that order.
Just before, there was three things you discussed, and I just want to comment on that. The first is about, you mentioned Frimley Park Hospital is actually, as a personal experience with different family member, is the best hospital. There was one member involved with heart surgery, saved his life, and they're known to be the best for this. And neonatal unit, they're known to be one of the best in the UK. So and they work really hard. They're known internationally. I know the royal family also get healed there, from what I understood. So that's a good hands. And the second one was, you discussed about, I didn't expect that. So we don't prepare. This is the proof. We don't edit. We don't prepare. We didn't have talk to Richard these 2 weeks. You mentioned on introvert versus extrovert, and this is a subject that I love. I discovered for me, I had an issue with, I am both. Sometimes I have phase when I want to just joke, laugh, and present and create things. And sometimes didn't have the mood at all. And I was very introvert and just wanted to do my, what I call the autistic things, like routine, or could be games, could be like working on my lab, etc. And I used to do acting to break that down, and that's very effective. Even though I'm not now playing on Broadway, or I'm not a public actor or something, but that helped. And for me, that podcast helped me to have a structure. So now what I'm doing in my workflow, I can share. Like David, you said you send yourself a message on WhatsApp. That's something I like to do. I use LinkedIn. I've followed all the people of key interest instead of scrolling social media or different things. And whatever I see, or that article is very important. It like context. So I save it. And just before the podcast, sometimes I forget we have the podcast. I see an email kindly from Richard the day before. Like, oh, so because I have this now routine since a year, you see, we talk about metrics, but for me, my metrics is that from 1 year, I see the progress on ourselves, and especially myself, because I can monitor myself only. And I see now I'm structured, my brain is structured to, when I see an interesting news article or even a project, something that I didn't know, and I learned from a colleague that this technology solved that problem. I didn't know it even existed. The feature that exists for 20 years, or I exaggerate, maybe 10 years, because the cloud. So I have this workflow. And what you mentioned just now, David, the Markdown tool, until today, for my blog, what I do is I do everything in Word, and I use a website that I find on Google. It's the first, you type doc to Markdown, but I don't trust that website because I don't know what they will do with that document. I mean, it's good. The aim is to be public, so they can use it, but I'm really excited to use that tool that you have, because if it's really for PowerPoint, etc., that they can put the image centered and put the comments that you have on that will be like a massive time gain for me, and to help me produce more. And you see now I try to say something short and it became a big hallucination. So first time I saw what's a AI hallucination, I was thinking of myself because sometimes I can do the same. So I apologize. So for my part, there's indeed Richard 3. Like I want to have this format where I'm going to separate the news into logical, interconnected elements. The first one is Entra, because I think this is absolutely massively exciting. Sorry, I think my sound is coming. There's actually it's a known news now. Since a few days, it's massively liked by plenty of people on LinkedIn and different even Microsoft blog. But I just wanted to reiterate here, that's a massive milestone. When we talk about cloud migration, we talk about the identity. And Richard, I know you will like that. The identity is the new center of. We keep mentioning that it is the new perimeter, and identity is so important for the era of the cloud, even for hybrid. We still, at least in my experience, whatever migration happens is always ending in a sort of variant of hybrid cloud, and the on-premise identity service, which is usually Active Directory, this one always stays the master, always for years. It says the master, and we use like it was Azure AD Connect, and it's called Entra Connect, if I'm not wrong. And this one is using the local identity piece and synchronize it to the cloud. And the issue with that, I can say it's an issue, is the AD is not safe. It's very easy to hack. So most of the leak, most of the hack you see in corporate world, even when you learn different kind of red teaming, pen testing, the mandatory lesson is always Active Directory, because it's very established what you can do. Microsoft can't really change much about this, and one of the key elements to be secure is to migrate to a cloud first. I mean, it's easy to say so, but now for the first time, Microsoft is now previewing a model where Entra becomes the source of authority for users, and then the on-prem directory follows. It will reduce hybrid complexity and unlocks modern lifecycle governance. Everything is given to Entra, and it aligns, that's what I said, to a cloud-first posture. And if you check the documentation, it will be in the description. You can check also on Google that source of authority to cloud. You will see clear guidance, prerequisites, and even, I was surprised, you can see even notes from teams that still depends on LDAP apps. And you will have steps, for example, that how you can migrate, and you will still first follow Entra domain services before switching to the new source of authority in the cloud. The suggestion is to start small, test one department, and measure the admin time you save. But that's a clear milestone that we saved. The second one in Entra is indirectly linked to that and takes the full advantage of being a cloud-first source of authority, and it's the passwordless. So now there's also a new guidance that is actually blunt. Microsoft completely suggests to scramble the password. So you set a long random password, unknown value, and you never touch it back, and you stop using the password completely. Of course, there's steps to arrive there, and you need to have like a set of users first that you know they are passwordless ready. So you move the users to a phishing resistant signing. We talked about that before multiple times. Passkeys, which is also used by Windows Hello for Business, FIDO2s, or third-base auth. My favorite one is Passkey with the native Microsoft Authenticator app. Very easy to use. I will try to not digress here because I want to. And for edge cases, you can use temporary access pass. For example, Intune. You can, when you onboard a device, you use temporary access pass. You don't need to create a password, cancel the password then, and guide the user to go to a full passwordless. And the doc also explains what to turn off after you fully moved, like not offering password recovery, for example, if nobody used password. And that's the idea to prevent calls to your support for anything related to the password. And it's the highest risk factor. So by doing that, you increase massively your secure score. And as Richard said multiple times, MFA, you know, like it avoids majority of like ransomwares or stupid hacks.
Just a quick digression on passkeys. So I think both Cyrus and David should be aware of this, that IBM is rolling out passkeys at the moment, and the process has actually been pretty smooth. One thing that I made a big pig's ear of, using an English colloquialism, is that when I set one password, so I'm using one password for as a password manager here, that the master password I set up, I actually set up as a really strong password, which I obviously can't remember. So I've had to store it on the computer.
Yeah,
and I can't find a way of changing it. There must be a way of changing it. So if anybody out there is listening to this can tell me how to change the master password in one password, please ping me and let me know so I can put a sensible one in there that I can actually remember without actually having to store it somewhere that I can access it and copy and paste it when I have to unlock one password. But Creative Cloud doesn't support passkey login, or at least currently. So everything else so far is working with a passkey, but every time I have to log into Creative Cloud, and I use that for Premiere for editing the podcast, I have to go and enter my username and password. Everything else is fine, but Creative Cloud, it doesn't. So I don't know whether it's they don't support passkeys or they don't support IBM's specific implementation of a passkey. I don't know, but that's one of those things. But anyway, back to you, Cyrus, and Intune.
We'll have to talk for the 1Password, because for IBM I also use the same, and I'm always afraid to lose the master password and shaming myself. But that's the weakest link actually, because your passkeys are stored into one place that you have only one password to. So there's still guidance and still education to be done, and I include myself too, because I still use this. I will not share in public what I do to copy paste the password. I can share privately, but it's still, borderline safe. Yeah. And there was for Adobe, I used, it's not passkey, but I used the app. They have an app just that now you don't have password anymore, and you just receive a notification, you press OK, but it's not passkey as per se. You're right. Okay, for Intune, it will be short. It's also excited me that news. It's going to the good direction for two reasons. So there's again a new guidance. So it's I think the season of guidance. I don't know. It's because Microsoft kind of a moment in October. So you have a guided, opinionated, should I say, setup for stronger security, and that's all I want. Like when I started learning Intune or these kind of things, because when you learn AVD or Windows 365, you go back to Endpoint Manager, Intune, SCCM. So the same thing that becomes bigger and more important. There's so many things you can do, and there's so many options and so many point of views, if you want. So I wanted a central place, which is like I wanted Microsoft to have like a strong opinion on settings that I need to apply first. But this one maps to Microsoft Secure Future Initiative. I think it's called like that. It's a pillar, and it blends Microsoft experience, baselines, and for example, NIST style thinking, and use it to raise the floor on things like device encryption, attack surface reduction, all the update hygiene we talked multiple times here, and admin protection, of course. And it helps starting in Intune safely. And I will link it to also the second one that is going to be shared also on the YouTube channel. I discovered that a long time ago, but it improved a lot, and they match together. It's called the Open Intune Baseline. And I just want to share something here. There is something called Security Baseline in Intune. And that is, I still do nightmares about that. Like before COVID, I used to manage some tenants. And I remember I was like, okay, I read from different MVPs or even from Microsoft. Oh, did you check the security baseline? Because as a short advice on me, as someone who just run on, I did the mistake of testing the production. I was stupid. It was a small tenant, and I activated those CIS security baseline. And when it replicated by miracle, only 2 or 3 users, but those 2 or 3 users could never access the device anymore. We had to do a wipe. By chance, they didn't lost much data. But even Microsoft support could not tell what this policy is doing, what this thing is doing, how to reverse engineer. So a lot of people are also now today afraid of this security baseline. You can't really use them as it is, and you have to still customize them. That's why the open security baseline align with the new guidance from Microsoft. For any project you want to do in the cloud, actually, you can start with known, safe, secure score friendly. You're going to gain majority of the points quick and without endangering your IT, the system admin's team to change the workflows. So that's I think worth mentioning. And you don't have to implement all the learnings or the advice. Is a known good, so you don't have to adopt one-to-one. You can apply and compare. And the third one is going to be short. It's Purview, and I was thinking of both of you because the channel started, the podcast started with those discussion with AI security, and it keep coming. So I was surprised again. This one didn't exist. I thought it existed for some reason. It's the Purview Insider Risk, and it's a new network-based detection for cloud apps and GenAI. And I was just following Merrill Fernando, and I saw that on one of his news. I don't know why it was in his blog, because it's free Purview. But this one, we often think insider risk is only for emails and files, at least for me. It was also for cloud apps. But we forget that people can paste sensitive data into, as I said, cloud apps, and especially GenAI tools in a browser. So the browser is, again, the main risk. And insider risk now is adding this network-based detection. So policies can see when sensitive data is shared to cloud apps, and for example, ChatGPT or whatever. And you can then have like a privacy aware, and you can have a policy that triggers when that happens. Or I don't know if it's real time, but that's actually something I have to test, because it can be really, really noisy, because you have approved GenAI in every company normally, but still, it's for me, it was a blind spot that was supposed to be solved.
I'm going to say something that I'm going to have to double check and then put a disclaimer on the on the video. Is I think that is real time. I'm sure I've seen a demo where it pops up a message as someone's dropping in a file into ChatGPT or whatever it was. So I think it is, but I will have to go and validate what I've just said and offer a retraction if I was telling lies.
The goal is to be, because that's GenAI is like instantaneous, so you need real time, at least like you need a reaction. And that's what I forgot to say. Thank you, Richard, actually, for saying that. Is you can link that to a DLP, and the DLP will be probably the real time reaction, like detect, and then I can just remediate whatever, block the access to the user. It's not native, you have to still work on the DLP, and it's easy to say, because then you can have all the users blocked just because they go on Google, and when you type on Google now, you have almost Gemini that says something to you.
Yes, I keep getting emails from my daughter saying, "Look what Google AI overview has said this time."
No,
not
actually,
not just AI overview. There are other Gen AI tools that get hallucinate and get things wrong. Shouldn't think I'm bashing Google in particular.
No, on my side, I'm sometimes sad when Google don't respond to me. Sometimes I do research, and I know now I have to put question mark and say why on what, to have at least Google giving me a first interpretation of my question. So I get addicted to those, insights, and I double check with different AI and stuff.
Again, another change of tack. I'll be interested to see how you two are doing this as well. And this goes back a few months now. I was listening to an episode of The Verge, I think it was, and they were saying how search habits are changing. They were actually referring more to TikTok than to Gen AI. They were saying that a lot of youngsters are searching on TikTok. I'm not entirely sure that's true, or at least not in the same way that you might do a Google search. You're probably searching for slightly different things on TikTok than you would do on Google. But I haven't gone to a traditional search engine to do a search for probably a good month or so now. I'm actually using, it works, I'm using Copilot, and I use Copilot for that. Now, again, you do have to, as I've already said today, you do have to look at that result and go, okay, is that true? And then go and probably validate it somewhere, or at least make sure the link is correct and what they're saying is true in the link. But I haven't gone to Bing or Google or what's the other one, Perplexity, a traditional search engine. And I know Perplexity isn't really a traditional one, but you get what I mean, for a little while now. I'd be interested to see whether you guys have your way that you're searching has changed recently.
When I'm looking for a specific thing, I'll absolutely avoid the AI results, because it tends to be, maybe it's just the way I search, but it tends to be a mishmash of a whole bunch of stuff that doesn't actually answer the thing that I'm after. But I tend to be, it's just the way I'm doing it. So, but if I'm after generic things, then absolutely, I'll just go to the AI first.
It's actually the same. So when I have an idea of website, I never learn by heart the website unless I go often. So I I type keywords and I ignore the generic stuff generated, and I find like Reddit or the blog or the article I was looking for. But if it's generic, as David said, and sometimes just a question, and I wanted to a quick summary. I don't go deep in the Gemini, sorry, because I know it's not relevant. But the first few words, or even debates, a question with different friends, my wife,
This is just a personal thing, but I've found that the search results I'm getting from most of the major search engines now are becoming increasingly irrelevant, or they're just links to a Reddit post. So you might as well just go and search directly in Reddit if you want to do that. But yeah, I'd be intrigued to see where this goes, because I have a feeling that as the Gen AI tools get more real time in terms of the knowledge that they're returning, that actually the sort of traditional search engine is actually going to go away. Hence why Google is doing the AI overviews in the first place, I suspect.
Sorry.
I was going to say, I can't remember whether it's Web 3 or Web 4 or whatever the language they're using, but it's the bimodal websites now that they're talking about. So the visual one where humans can go look, but the shadow website where all the AI can go look, and it's optimized for them. Because you're right, people are seeing massive drops in terms of traffic to their sites because of it.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen it on the companion blog site we have here. I mean, that's never had the biggest amount of traffic. I mean, I'll be lucky if I get 50, I used to get 50 or 60 hits a day on that. So nothing major, but that has dramatically dropped off. And I can see that actually I'm now getting referrals from ChatGPT to that site, which I thought was interesting. But you can see where that is now going, is people are asking the question in the tool, whether it's Gemini, ChatGPT, Copilot, whatever it might be, and then they might be going to the link to check the results, but otherwise they're getting the meat of it in the response.
Yeah, one of my expectations is that whatever I produce or whatever we do here, we get referenced by the generator. That's success. I see sometimes when I ask questions, I see some MVP's article and I mention to them, I say, look, you came to my prompt. So it's the new way to do things, and we'll see that more often. I see actually it's the new generation 15 to 22. When I talk to this generation openly, I'm not using Google anymore. I thought it was just a slogan or just like a way to say or to be cool. I don't use Facebook, I use Instagram, I use Snapchat. No, it's actually genuinely for dumb question too that you can find quickly on Google, they use Gen AI.
Yeah.
Just a small news for both of you and probably the audience. Did you saw that Microsoft is so we used to have a geek corner before the first episode we always shared some geek stuff. So Microsoft open sourced 6502 Basic.
Yes, I saw that. Yeah.
That's I find it really cool because it's the Commodore 64. And there's still an active community today to develop. I was really surprised to develop application for Commodore 64 today and games. And there's also very young generation that are in IT school that know historically that the Commodore 64 was like the Atari, or this is a really important one, and they develop games literally new code, maybe AI generated, to develop games for that thing, and I find it really cool. Very, 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 very cool.
Yeah, it takes me back. First, trying to learn basic. Go to line 10. If X, go to line 20. Return whatever the phrases were. All those line numbers.
10 print hello.
20 go to 10.
Yeah, bad command or file name. That does remind me of one of the stupid things I did when I was studying. Is that we had in the computer room, I went around and wrote a small, very, very simple sort of DOS program because you remember you had to actually sort of type in a prompt to actually open up the application that you were using. So I just wrote a little command that just returned bad command or file name to anything that anybody ever put into the prompt, and installed it on all the workstations. So in the morning, people would come in and go, "Oh, I don't know what it was. Launch XYZ application," and just go bad command or file name for everybody. I couldn't capture the control break command though, so that was the way to get out of that application.
I got on quite well with the computer teacher, so he was a great guy. But and we were doing assembler because we had to learn assembler. I wrote a couple of TSRs, terminate and stay resident in memory, and it would beep the keyboard every time somebody keyboard and just put it on all the machines. Everyone walked into the lab and all you could hear is beep 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 beep.
So any youngsters watching this, don't do that sort of thing.
We flag as a virus now, right?
Yeah, probably.
Dumb question. We don't have the, we had in PCs the speaker on the motherboard that screamed like this sound. Does it still exist today on the devices?
My big PC, you have to bring the speaker with you. They're not on the boards anymore. It's a separate plugin.
Yeah.
Okay. I remember that sound.
People, the diagnostic maps are super important.
Yes. If it's a RAM problem, if it's like the hard drive or the processor.
Unless you were like me and you couldn't wire them up properly when you put because I used to build my own PCs years and years and years ago, but I could never be bothered to hook up the cables to the lighting system properly. Because there was always like little dip switches that you had to configure to say, okay, yes, this one is like this setting that does, I don't know, like the hard drive activity light or something like that. And I was like, do you know what? I don't really need to. I don't care about that. So these days, of course, they'd frown at that because all the PCs are all sort of lights and RGB like things like, and yeah. But then I was like, oh, do you know what? I can't be bothered to faff about with dip switches. I just won't have that light on there. But anyway, that says a lot more about me, I think, than it does about anything else. All right, with that blast from the past, or at least from us, which will suit our demographics according to Spotify, right down to the to the ground. I will basically just say thank you very much for me. Again, if you did get to this point in the podcast or video, depending on what you're watching on, thank you very much. And please do drop us a like, comment, reach out to me on LinkedIn or us on LinkedIn. It's probably the easiest way to get hold of me. And I'll wish you a good rest of the day, and we will speak again in 2 weeks' time.